What is going on, sports card fiends? Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day, and today we are here with a video on the PSA dead zone, the types of slabs that I'm not buying. It doesn't have to be PSA, it could be BGS, SGC, HGA, CSG, whatever you use nowadays, whatever the kids are up to. What sorts of slabs I am not interested in, and we'll start by talking about the fundamentals. We'll get into why you actually want to buy graded slabs, what utility they have, and how that breaks down into different level brackets. So let's go ahead and hop on into it. So when it comes to why we would want to grade something, the biggest factor for me personally is authenticity, to know that something is real. In the soccer card market, this is especially prevalent because if you've done enough digging, you'll see there are plenty of fakes and reprints of different types of cards and stickers, and with how much different types of objects there are in soccer and how many different eras and different distributors and just people making these products, and it's just all over the place. As you already know, there's so much to go through with soccer that then understanding the differences between the fake ones and the real ones becomes even harder. So for me in soccer, the most important thing is if it's authentic. Now in other sorts of markets, that can be different. For example, with ultra modern cards that are graded, it really isn't a question of if it's real, because there's so many of them that more than likely it's real. So that's not always the case. The second most important would be the condition. This might be the most important in other markets. Of course, it's going to matter what your condition is. Personally, I think people overrate this. I'm not someone that goes out and buys a bunch of PSA 10s, because at the end of the day, I would much rather have 4 9s compared to a PSA 10, because at the end of the day, you don't even know if the PSA 10 is truly a PSA 10. You don't know if it's pristine. It could be anywhere on the bell curve of what a PSA 10 is, and maybe it's on the low end, and maybe when you grab 4 PSA 9s, maybe you'll get some on the high end, and essentially you'll probably have a card that's pretty similar along with a few extras. And so for me, that's worth it. So I think a lot of people overvalue this one, and I'll talk more about that later. So that's a little overvalued to me. Next is safety. Just having a card in a slab does make it inherently safer, better to ship, all of those types of things. You'll be in a better place going forward, and for reselling and all that type of stuff, no one can really question it. There's a lot of safety in terms of the sale as well. People know what they're getting. There's not going to be any surprises, so that's also very nice as well. Fourth would just be eye appeal. People like stuff in a slab, depending on who they are and what they believe in terms of collecting. Some people might be avidly against it, other people might see it as a sort of useful eye appeal feature, and some people may see it as a sort of useful eye appeal feature. And finally, liquidity. This is maybe a bit more important than I have it here. Really depends on what you have, what your plans are with it. But at the end of the day, again, if it's in a slab, people know what they're getting. They already have an idea of what item they're going to have at hand in the future, and so they'll feel more comfortable when they go out to buy. And having all of these previous features does make it an item easier to sell because people have more faith in it. So for authenticity, in theory, this should be the most important. To me, whenever I look at the soccer card landscape, the soccer market has a need for authenticity deeply, because again, as I mentioned before, there are so many different sets, so many different producers of these items, so many different licensed, unlicensed things. There are just a ton of different variables. So in the soccer market in particular, authenticity is key. In other markets, again, like a more modern market and something like basketball, maybe that's not necessarily the case. However, for truly collectible things, I do think authenticity is the most important, because people want to know it's real. And if people want to know it's real, that means they truly care about it. If people want to know the grade, I don't know if they truly care about it. But if they want to know it's real, then that's good. So condition could be the most important when you combine it with people caring that it's authentic. So for something like a 71 Mega Cracks Messi, people definitely want to know whether or not it's real, so that's checked off. And then beyond that, condition is going to be the most important, because a PSA 10 to a PSA 1 has a huge difference in price. So depending on the card, condition can be the most important. It probably shouldn't be, but to some people it will be. Also, obviously condition varies a lot. A PSA 1 is much different than a PSA 10, so I do understand the premium and I certainly agree with it. However, at the same time, condition only really matters if people also want the card. If the card eventually becomes something no one cares about, then what does it matter if it's in a 10 or a 9? Like, no one wants it. It doesn't matter. So condition has applications where it might not make sense. Something like the Zion market is one that I like to point to. I mean, there's 37,000 graded Prism base at the moment, and that's just Prism base. That's not including all of the other sorts of base cards, all of the raw cards, all the number. There's There's so many of these cards, and for people to just willingly send in 37,000 to determine whether or not they're a 9 or a 10 is wild to me, because everyone could just sit there and buy raw cards and know, hey, there's probably a 50-50 shot based on what this is saying. Maybe it's closer to 30-70, whatever. You don't necessarily need to grade on condition for that stuff. Obviously, if the market demands it, then you might do it, but that's another thing. That's the market compared to how you want to act, and you have to decide that for yourself. So for me, a lot of these factors are overrated. For one, having it safe inside of a slab isn't really all that important. There are other ways to protect your items without needing it in a plastic case. Eye appeal isn't really something I understand too much. I do get that it has a small tad of eye appeal, so for maybe higher priced items I could understand the eye appeal being worth it, but for lower priced things it really doesn't make much sense. And then liquidity is sometimes overrated. I'll say that's the least overrated out of the bunch. That's a lot of the reason why people grade cards, is so that they can have a better chance at selling them and that the market knows what they're getting exactly, so that's actually a good thing. But at the end of the day, that is dependent on whether or not people want your card in the first place. If they want your card, then it matters. But if they don't want your card, it doesn't matter if you made it a little more liquid in a PSA slab, it's still not desirable. And this is very dependent, but again, like the Zion situation, condition can be the most overrated. Depending on if the card's truly desirable, unique, valuable long-term, then condition could matter. If it's not, condition's not going to matter at all, and then paying all these companies to basically just sift through which ones have scratches on them is pretty silly whenever people might not want it. So that's the risk with grading things early on in someone's career before they're necessarily established, is that you do not know if grading it is actually worth the price tag. Now, if you're going to sell it, that might not matter to you, but the market at some point is going to pay that toll, and so you have to be considerate of that. So overall, as far as the 5 applications that I talked about here today, on the low end, under a $50 card, essentially the only thing that you're really going to have of value is the liquidity factor, because selling things at this low price point, if you do have it in a slab, it's going to be the most desirable to the market. So there is some value in that regard. That's why so many companies have been chasing to see who can grade bulk low-end cards at the lowest value, because people do want things slabbed. For the mid-end cards at $50 to $500 here, authenticity is kind of useful. In addition to that, condition can be nice and liquidity is good as well. So you have a few more factors in your favor. What I would argue here is that most cards in this segment, honestly, authenticity is not going to matter. If you were in a market like basketball, authenticity doesn't matter at all. For soccer, $50 to $500 range, there definitely are going to be some fakes, so you would maybe like to have it authenticated. And condition as well is something that's very iffy in this segment. So I'd argue that number 1 and 2 in the mid-end could easily not be there, because condition only matters if people truly genuinely want a card. And so for a lot of cards with extremely high pop that are on a downtrend that really have no value to the people that are in possession of them, you have to realize that those could go away. So I would say mid-end is the scariest, because while it does have some added benefits that low-end doesn't, it's not necessarily a guarantee that that's needed. And condition is something that the market has decided is worthwhile for now, but will that be in the case in the future? Who knows? So number 1 and 2 could easily not be there, and for that, I basically see the utility in grading stuff at that price range to be the same as low end. There's really no reason other than liquidity and just being able to sell. And then on the high end, of course, every single one of these has some utility, in the sense that a high end card, you need to know it's authentic, you need to know its condition. Having it in a slab safe is worth the extra little bit that you'll pay. The eye appeal is great and the liquidity is amazing. So if you have a high end card, it makes a ton of sense to get it graded, because everything's working in your favor. With the low end card, you have liquidity, so it is nice in case if something is to pop for a second, you'll be able to sell it, which is really useful. So on the low end, I love that liquidity is the only thing that's available to it, because really that's all you need, is whenever something pops, you just want to be able to sell it, and people will care about yours first. So low end's great for that. The mid end is where I really question a lot of the principles behind the grading, because a lot of mid-end cards, to be honest with you, are probably $30 to $50 cards that got graded for 10 to 20 bucks, and so essentially people are in it for 40 to 80 bucks, and they're trying to sell it for 2, 3, 4, 500, somewhere up there, just to get a great return, when in reality their card is basically worthless, and the idea of grading that card was honestly probably pretty stupid. So the $50 to $500 price range is where you're at the will of the market. The market can decide if it's going to enjoy enjoy your item or if it's not going to, while on the low end you have very little downside, and on the high end you have all the guarantees that you need with a card like that. So certainly this isn't a hard and fast rule. You can choose to buy whatever you'd like, and personally I do buy slabs that are in that mid-end price range, but I'm very, very particular with what I'm buying in that range, because again, there's a lot of things that are a little questionable to me. And of course, this isn't to say that you should go out and buy every high-end card or every low-end card, because all of them are worthwhile if they're slabbed. That's certainly not the case. Just saying that those are the directions that I tend towards at the moment, and then from there I make a decision based off of all the other information of the card and the grade. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like. On top of that, would love to know what sort of slabs you're looking out for, what you're kind of avoiding. Maybe it's in a certain market, maybe certain grades, maybe certain graders. Would love to hear it down below so I can see what the community thinks. And beyond that, if you want to see more videos like this as soon as I go live, make sure to subscribe. But with that said, hopefully you have a wonderful day, and peace.